Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to The Only Podcast. My name is Chris Vanini, your host. I'm joined, as always, by The Only Colors managing editor, Joe Tui. It's been a while since we did one of these. A lot of things kind of been, been kind of slow in the news. I moved. Both Joe and I have had vacations, so it's kind of been hard to pin down a date. But once some news came out, what was it, Monday or Tuesday, finally able to find some time to get back down together. So, Joe, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Chris. Glad to hear that you found a new place to live. Was a little concerned for you there for a minute.
Yep, it's good. It's been surprisingly busy summer, even though my work for coaching searches is usually the down period, but been busy with that. Been busy with other stuff. Obviously a bunch of stuff's been going on at TOC. Why don't you kind of, for people who maybe aren't regular viewers of the site, although if you're listening to this, you probably are. What's been going on for the past few weeks at TOC? I know we got a bunch of changes.
Yeah, we've got a couple new contributors. They actually haven't put anything up yet. We've got contributor Trewan Briggs, who's been taking over the position previews for football, who actually played at in D1 for a couple different places. I think he played in New Mexico, and so he's an actual D1 athlete contributing to TOC, which is absolutely a first, I'm pretty sure. So that's pretty exciting. We're currently working on some team preview roundtables for the upcoming football season, which is only like 30 some days away. I know it's less than 40, which is extremely crazy. And we've got new TOC t-shirts that were quite a process to get up and going, but they're up there and they're pretty cool. I think I know there's some people who aren't big fans of the TOC logo, but I think it's actually pretty cool.
I think at this point most people have come around on the logo. It's been a while since we had that whole logo change. I don't even know if you were around back then.
No, I was definitely. I mean, I was a reader, but I was.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of run site, yeah. But no, I actually, when we made the logo change, as part of the SB Nation change, they sent out a shirt or shirts to everybody at every blog with the logo on there, and I just found mine like a week or two ago, actually, and I realized the logo was off center. I'm surprised I hadn't noticed that before, but
these kind of funny.
These shirts look nice, and they've got a nice tagline there. So if you're a frequent reader, contributor, whatever, wear it around and look cool to all your friends.
Yeah, I'm hoping, especially in Ann Arbor, it'll be really interesting to see if I can ever spot people wearing a TOC t-shirt. My guess is it'll be relatively rare in Ann Arbor, but that'll be fun. And hopefully we'll get a tailgate going this year, and it'll be a good way to recognize people. I'm going to buy a couple of them, and hopefully should be a pretty cool thing. I think people have sort of wanted one for a while, and it's cool that we've got one up. I mean, the way that those are printed is always on demand. So, you can choose the type of shirt that you want. You can choose if you want it in white or in green. They've got huge sizes, up to 3XL. So pretty cool stuff. And yeah, I mean, football season's coming up, and we're pretty excited about that. Yeah, it's a exciting time for TOC. We had a huge day a couple days ago. Lots of good stuff going up about football, and we'll have Big Ten Media Days soon. Camp starting. I'm sure there will be a lot of fun camp stories. So yeah, take a look at TOC.
Yeah, make sure you follow TOC on Twitter at The Only Colors. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes. I always forget to say that, but it's an easier way to download podcasts. And presumably, as we get into the season, we'll be doing these with more frequency as more stuff obviously happens. So yeah, the biggest story in terms of, I guess, the biggest non-recruiting story maybe all summer has been Delton Williams, the running back who was arrested back in the spring for brandishing a firearm. He was arrested, later pled to a lesser charge, and it was announced he missed all spring, and it was announced earlier this week that he will not, or that he is being reinstated to the team. There was no official announcement of any game suspensions. Williams said in the press release that he hadn't considered transferring at all, that he wanted to stay at MSU. Sounded, I mean, I don't know how much of the press release quotes were his direct words or press release written, but they seemed like very mature comments, the kind you don't normally see in a press release like that. But a lot of people, both MSU fans and especially not MSU fans, pointed to the lack of a game suspension, at least publicly, going off the assumption that, I guess we're going off the assumption that he won't be suspended for games. But Joe Rexrode reported that he will be a non-scholarship player for the fall, which is a bigger deal than I think a lot of people realize, especially with him being an out-of-state player from Pennsylvania, and with all these tuition hikes that come. This should be several thousands of dollars that his family he will have to pay to go to school. So, Joe, I know you were quite defensive of Mark D'Antonio on Twitter after this came down. What's your take on the punishment?
Yeah, I mean, I think the crazy thing, and I probably should have phrased this way on Twitter as well, but losing your scholarship is worse than missing games for a number of reasons, especially because at this point, Delton Williams is not an NFL caliber player. He might get there. He definitely has the potential to get there, but at this point he isn't. So to have to pay for his education, pay his own way is a pretty big deal. Now, is that the reason why he's not missing games, so that he wouldn't have to miss the Oregon game, but there's still some punishment? I don't know. That's kind of a hard thing to figure out, but players make mistakes. College kids make mistakes. It's pretty straightforward. He had to deal with, and has had to deal with, a lot already. And, you figure for every 3 guys who never have another issue, there's one Glenn Winston or something like that, right? Where you give a guy a second chance and he takes advantage of it. But, ultimately, the university decided that he could stay a student, which I think was sort of one of the bigger questions, and something that I'm not sure if it was Hollis or D'Antonio mentioned, was they had to sort of let that run its course before they could even figure out how they could handle it internally as well. So arguments that I was making on Twitter were bad ones, right? They were arguments about how other schools have similar issues. And so, I mean, just because other schools have problems with discipline potentially does not mean that this was the right or wrong punishment for Delton. And I can't be impartial about it, right? Because I want him to play. I think he's going to be a pretty serious contributor. Figure he's going to be part of the running backs rotation if he's not missing time. So, but ultimately, I'm pretty okay with how that all worked out. If D'Antonio seems lenient, I'm okay with that. I think student athletes kind of get a relatively unfair shake in general anyways. So it's I'm perfectly okay with it. Yeah, Delton, I'm glad to see that he'll be back.
I think there were some details in this case that made it a little bit more nuanced than a lot that you see. For one, the guy who turned Williams in, the guy at whom Williams showed his firearm in a alleged road rage incident, wrote a letter to, I believe, the police department, and asked that this kind of not go through, because Williams' brother was recently killed in an unsolved murder in I believe in Pennsylvania, where he's from, and so the accuser said he can understand why Williams had a firearm, and Williams did have a permit to carry. The problem is, I believe it's an MSU campus law for one, that you're not allowed to have a gun on campus, so that was a big part of the issue too. And I mean, that's a big thing. Do I think Williams was going to shoot him? I don't think so. I really don't think he was going to shoot him. I don't think anyone really thinks that. But it was a moment in obvious frustration. So he didn't cause physical harm to anybody. That's another thing. I know there have been issues, especially with players D'Antonio has had in the past, that there have been physical altercations that resulted in various punishments. This didn't have it. So I mean, I can understand, given the amount of the varying degrees of punishment D'Antonio has handed out in the past, why people are quick to jump on it. But I think you kind of got to look at these all separately. In the Rather Hall incident, every player who served jail time was kicked off the team or either encouraged to transfer, I believe, other than Fred Smith, who ended up moving to fullback. So that's one that a lot of people point to. Another one is Glenn Winston getting another chance after the incident with the hockey team, having another issue. I think a lot of people regret how that went down. However, I know it was Rexroad wrote a good story, might have been a year ago, about what Winston's up to and how Winston seemed to be trying to turn things around. So, these are kids, these are people. There's different instances of what happens. I know, and I'm not surprised. It said D'Antonio gave Williams the chance to work his way back, and I'm not surprised Williams took it, because when he was getting recruited, he was arrested on I think a marijuana possession charge when he was in high school, and a lot of schools, including Penn State, backed off of him as soon as they did, and MSU didn't, and that meant a lot to Williams, and that was a big factor in him choosing Michigan State, was because MSU stuck by him. So, he could still, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of that. I think statistically, right, there's type 1 error and type 2 error. Type 1 error is when, and in this case, type 1 error would be you kick a guy off the team when, he probably would have been totally fine being on the team the rest of his playing career. Type 2 error would probably be, keeping a player on the team and having him get into another incident. And I think it's totally worth giving a guy a second chance and taking that, the possibility that something happens again.
Well, devil's advocate here. The argument, do you view this as a third chance given his drug arrest? Although I will say that drug arrest in high school, the charges I believe they were dropped. So that didn't come of anything. But would you consider this a third chance? Does two, I guess, incidents, does that factor into anything at all for you?
No, I just because he's a high school kid at the point of whatever happened in high school, and I guess I don't know much about that particular scenario. So, but no, ultimately, I think you have to evaluate his actions as an MSU student, as an MSU athlete, and whatever happened beforehand is sort of water under the bridge at that point. So I think, and clearly it doesn't, based on his comments, and who knows, right, if that was press release speak or what have you, but he seems genuinely, remorseful, and I'm pretty sure that we won't have any other issues with him. And then, if there is another issue with him, then he can be kicked off the team, right? I mean, I don't see how, missing games specifically is necessarily a better or worse punishment than losing a scholarship. To me, losing your scholarship is, pretty much the worst thing that can happen.
I do think that's a real big deal. I don't know his family's financial background, but for anybody, with the rising, costs of college, that is a heavy. If it was a professional player, you could look at it as a fine, and add in the fact that it'd be a very heavy fine for a kid like that, and add in the fact that you add in the cost of attendance stipends that players are going to get, which is supposed to be a few $1,000s. That I imagine he's going to miss out on that too. It's another you kind of add out onto money that he's not going to be getting. So if you kind of look at it from a little bit of a professional type standpoint, that is a very big deal. Now, you had been tracking the amount of football scholarships, right?
Sarah's on mute. Yeah, I have been. And in fact, at this point, even actually it was a day before the Delton news came out, I kind of presumed that he wouldn't be on scholarship based on, and actually Mike Wilson, TOC alum, kind of reported this about a month ago at the end of June, saying that it was likely that Delton would be back, but that he wouldn't be on scholarship. So yeah, I mean, it's actually that it's an interesting consideration because having him not be on scholarship might open up a spot in the 2016 class, although kind of figure that he'd, get back to being a scholarship player next year if he's still on the team. But
they've got enough guy. There aren't too many, right? Because I remember a couple months ago you were looking at the numbers and wasn't quite sure how they were gonna.
So as of 2016, as far as I can tell, there are exactly 85 scholarship players after AJ Arcuri is added in, who's the newest commit. After all the Gavin Cup stuff, which I think we're going to talk about here in a second. But
does that include Delton Williams?
No, that's assuming that Delton Williams is not on scholarship in 2016. In 2015, there are a couple open scholarships. There's only 83 guys on scholarship as of 2015. My guess is that AJ Troop would go on scholarship because he's still a walk-on, and potentially Sean Harrington, the linebacker, could go on scholarship, and potentially Kevin Cronin, the kickoff specialist, could go on scholarship. So there are plenty of guys that they could extend scholarships to that aren't currently. Even a guy like Cole Chewins, who's a gray shirt right now, who isn't on scholarship for this year but would be in future years, could end up just being on full scholarship this year as well. So there's no shortage of guys that you could give scholarships, that's for sure.
Okay, well,
but for 2016, yeah, for 2016, it looks like it's full, but that's assuming that Conklin is back, which is sort of unlikely. So
yeah,
there's probably at least one spot.
I figure, I don't know the specifics, but I imagine this scholarship suspension removal is probably a fall only thing. Is that dinging in the background? Is that you got like a fire going on? You're right.
There's no fire. I think that we need to replace a battery and a fire alarm.
That's what it is.
Smoke alarm.
Make sure you do that. You don't want the house to burn down.
Yeah, it'd be bad if the apartment building burned down, huh?
Or apartment, yeah, that'd be bad.
Yeah. So sorry about that, podcast listeners. That's
No, I wanted to address it because people are probably listening and getting annoyed by that.
I look like that image that everyone tweets out with the dog sitting drinking coffee in with fire. This is fine.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so I mean, with Williams, you can believe he should be suspended for games. You can believe he should be kicked off the team. I don't think those punishments would have been necessarily too harsh. D'Antonio's track record, sometimes it's hasn't worked out with like Glenn Winston. Sometimes it has worked out. A guy like Kirk Cousins, who was involved in that situation or not. Remember that? You there?
Yeah, I'm here. What was Kirk Cousins involved
I
in?
made a really good joke. You didn't laugh. No,
Oh,
remember Rob Parker said Kirk
oh
Cousins was involved
yeah.
in that fight, and yeah. So no, he wasn't.
That's an
That was a
obscure
joke.
one. That's an
It
obscure
was
one,
a good
Chris.
joke, but you weren't paying too much attention. So hopefully the listener has got a good chuckle out of that. But
It's always good when you have to explain it. That's
yes,
always
yes,
a good sign.
exactly. Yes. So Denton Williams is back. Perfectly fine to debate the thing. My point was just simply, there's nuance in these arguments. You know, there's different situations. You look at what has been going on at Florida State. I don't think anybody would throw, what's gone on there at MSU under D'Antonio in that light. You look at Joe Mixon at Oklahoma still being on the team. There's various levels of punishments. There's various levels of things to be outraged at. I thought this punishment was fair for Denton Williams. Losing his scholarship is a pretty big deal, a really big deal. But if you thought it should have been more, I won't argue with you. I think that's fair. But he's gonna be on the team. He's probably gonna be the number one running back, and he's probably gonna have a pretty good year because he is a talented football player. So we'll see. He's actually gonna miss, I think, the first week of fall camp too, based on the dates that they gave out. But
Yeah, fall camp opens the first week of August, or maybe August 9th. And
opens the 8th. He's going to be there the 14th, I think. So
yep.
So in terms of the current team, it's about all there really is to talk about. Not much. Another year of just kind of not much news going on. MSU's looking like a top 10, 15 team, various odds, various polls.
There was like everybody got put on a watch list, right?
Yeah, it was a billion watch lists,
including Josiah Price and I think Darian Harris and Jack Allen was on a bunch of them.
Yeah, pretty much everyone.
So, and yeah, Conklin.
Question marks coming into the season. I think you look at the defensive backfield. We can talk about it a little bit more as we get into when fall camp comes out, and I believe they have a fall camp depth chart at the beginning of camp. Then we can talk about those specifics more. But they got to find that corner situation figured out. They got to figure out who's going to be the top receivers. Looks like Denton Williams will presumably be the top running back. Defensive, and then they're pretty good on both lines. So we'll talk about that more as kind of we get into camp. But the other big story that drew some national attention was the recruiting story and a scholarship being pulled. Joe, do you want to explain that?
Yeah, so what happened was, and it's sort of hazy because the team can't comment on non-committed players. So until guys sign their letters of intent, they can't actually comment on anyone, which makes it all hearsay, which makes that rule kind of silly too in a lot of ways. So, but in any case, what happened was Gavin Cupp, 2016 offensive lineman from Ohio, had his scholarship pulled by D'Antonio. Now, the reason for that, it has been theorized, is that Cupp attended Friday Night Lights camp in Columbus at Ohio State, and it had been reported, or at least there had been hearsay on Twitter about Cupp not letting the staff know, the MSU football staff know that he would be at that camp and participating in drills. So there were some other MSU commits who were in attendance actually at that camp, but they didn't do drills, and in theory they let MSU staff know that they would be there. So it's hard to know because Cupp later said that he had attempted to contact MSU staff and let them know that he was going to be going, and couldn't get a hold of anybody, which seems weird. So, but it's an entirely one-sided story because there's just no way to know. The university can't, D'Antonio and his staff can't comment on, uncommitted players, guys who haven't signed their NLIs yet. So it's weird. I mean, it's a weird situation. And then the sort of follow up to that is, as soon as Cup got his scholarship pulled, an offer went out to AJ Arcuri, who's another 2016 offensive lineman from Ohio. And Arcuri committed, the next day or a couple days later, taking that offensive line spot. So it's an interesting situation because this class has filled up much faster than most. And my projected roster shows, a full 85-man class. And there's some interesting stuff on Twitter also about Abdul Adams, who's the running back from Washington, D.C., who's committed for 2016, visiting Alabama and tweeting out some stuff about getting an Alabama offer. And there were some terrible Twitter MSU fans that were, tweeting about how he should, if he's committed, he should be committed. And it's just always a bad idea to tweet.
That means you've made it as a fan base when you start tweeting terrible things as recruits, right?
God, it's so bad though, and especially when you get called out on Twitter for tweeting terrible things at recruits, it's probably time to just delete your account. I mean, scrap the account. It's terrible it's unbelievable that you could be swearing at 17-year-old kids who are making probably the most important decision of their lives, trying to make sure that they've got, their entire process done with. So, but what's interesting about that to me is clearly there were a lot of guys who committed early to MSU. And so whenever you have guys who commit early, there's always a chance that they'll flip to other places or, decommit. So I think this was in a lot of ways sort of a warning shot by D'Antonio to all the committed guys. Like, look, we got a pretty full class, if not a completely full class. And if, you aren't going to be, forthright with what you're doing and who you're visiting and stuff like that, then, we won't hesitate to pull your offer and extend it to somebody else and fill the class that way, because there are no shortage of guys willing to come to MSU at this point, and recruiting has sort of gotten to that place, which is exciting. So yeah, it's an interesting situation.
Yeah. MSU's in a position where they're highly sought after by recruits, where if they lose a guy on the decommitment, it's not as costly as it used to. Cup situation, like it was said, they've had other guys work out at other camps as long as they've given a notice. I can't imagine. It's hard to imagine MSU going through what turned out to be a pretty public pulling of a scholarship if it was a simple misunderstanding, given everything. So you tend to side with the coaches here just based on that. But it's an interesting situation. You get kind of weird recruiting stories like this, but MSU obviously filled it. The point was made that if you want to be at MSU, you're going to have to pick MSU because they can afford to be picky. And MSU's class is number 11 on 24/7 Sports at 20 scholarships. So his class is basically full. So they'll probably finish right around there.
Yeah, I would think maybe one more guy, because I would presume that Conklin won't be around for a full extra year.
It's hard to tell on those things too.
And there could be natural attrition anyways, with guys retiring potentially or what have you. So yeah, I mean, that's a tough situation. And yeah, I mean, it's tough. I agree with you. I think you generally side with the coaches. It's not like they've been pulling a whole bunch of scholarship offers from a whole bunch of kids. And so, yeah, and the fact that they extended an offer to an offensive lineman that hadn't had an offer and who committed pretty much immediately says to me that they had been at least relatively stingy with putting offers out there. And I think, there are not that many high-profile guys in 2016 at this point. Donnie Corley stands out, the receiver, who's a major recruit, would be one of the top 3 guys in this class, if not the top guy, if he committed, is a big target. But other than that, I mean, there are other guys who have offers, but I don't think anybody that is a super hot target. So yeah, I mean, I think as far as recruiting stories go, it's a weird one, but ultimately,
it's not as weird as Jay Dat Bull Harris, that's for sure.
Yeah, no.
And it's not as weird as Malik McDowell. This MSU's had its fair share of crazy recruiting stories. I think this one's probably low on that total.
Caleb Swanigan, maybe, or Jabari Parker. I mean,
well, yeah, I meant football. Really.
Even just football, right? So, or even guys like Tabor Pepper had a funny story, right, where he was a walk-on committed to U of M, and then as a long snapper got a scholarship offer from MSU.
Yeah,
like
Jack Conklin was going to Fork Union Military Academy, and now he's possibly going to be leaving early for the NFL.
Right.
He go down. Yeah, I guess we'll have to see, but he may go down as the biggest steal D'Antonio ever got, and that's to me, and that's a list that includes Darqueze Dennard and Le'Veon Bell, and Bell may be the best running back in the NFL right now. But
and that's not to mention Kirk Cousins, who was a low 3-star.
Right, Conklin, like, he didn't even have a rating. Like recruiting services didn't even know him. They went with Conklin with the idea he was going to fill out, and boy did he. And I was surprised at the end of last year. He probably should have won Big Ten Offensive Lineman of the Year. Scherf won it, I think, partly on his name and reputation coming in, and it was going to be hard to unseat him because obviously a very, very good player. But I think Conklin may have had a better year, and I saw some Big Ten network analysts actually that agreed with that. And yet we didn't see many early mock drafts that included Conklin, and I was kind of surprised. And then I think people had kind of forgotten about him and finally realized about him and said, "Oh, we should add him on there." Because then all of a sudden you started seeing him pop up on all the lists. Once it was like a guy people just like forgot and didn't even think about. He's always just been under the radar, and he had allowed like 1 or 2 sacks either on the year in his career going into that Baylor game before giving up 1 or 2. Completely shut down Joey Bosa and what Ohio State had. That guy is really, really good, and he's going to be such a huge part of things this year, protecting Cook, helping open up run holes. So he has a chance to really, really be something.
Yeah, the sack rate in general last year was extremely low, and there are probably
the last 2 years. Other than the Rose Bowl against Stanford, it's been, I think, like top 5 in the country. In terms of total sacks allowed per game, not the sack rate, but.
And I would assume it'll stay right there this year, considering that you've got Conklin, Jack Allen, Brian Allen, guys who Donovan Clark, guys who have been around for a while and are clear starters. I can only imagine it'll be about the same this year.
And you have to, barring an injury, he should be the one who ends the streak. The only position D'Antonio has not seen drafted into the NFL at MSU is offensive line. And the angry MSU offensive lineman hating God has not been around for a while. 2012, when he kind of blew up, and I kind of stole it off of the Iowa deal. Ever since I revealed him, he has been absent. So
I think you're angering the angry MSU offensive lineman.
Right,
camp is about to open, Chris. Why are you doing this?
Maybe he's just been biding his time. He's going to return like the Undertaker did.
Oh God, yeah. Well, if there are a bunch of offensive lineman injuries at the start of fall camp, we know who to blame.
Right. What I'm saying is, I am Brock Lesnar. That is the moral of this story. Anything football related you want to talk about before we talk a little bit about basketball?
No, I think we
actually I got some. This is
okay.
Not related to MSU. the coaches are making the rounds in ESPN, and they're all being asked about a couple things that really are stupid. For one, why the hell are we talking about who the best division in college football was last year? Whether it was the ACC, whatever one Florida State's in, whether it's the SEC West, whether it's the Pac-12 South, who the hell cares? Like, conference debate was kind of dumb on its own. Division debate is even stupider. And why are we talking about last year's? We're a month away from the season starting. Who the hell cares? And every coach got asked. Every ACC coach said, "What do you think about the SEC? The ACC look pretty good." And they have to go, "Yeah, I think the ACC is the best." Everybody thinks their own thing's the best. It's such a stupid thing. The other thing, Notre Dame, and all of a sudden every coach deciding to jump on board saying Notre Dame should join a conference because they don't play a 13th conference game or whatever. For one, Notre Dame annually has one of the toughest schedules in the country. They don't have very many, if any, I don't think any, FCS games. They always have a very tough schedule, for one. So if you want to take away the cheapie that every team seems to have at least one, then you can equal them on the games there. Two, Notre Dame doesn't have to join a conference because Notre Dame doesn't need to join a conference. They are a national brand. They are relevant. They can afford to – they make enough money. They have a national television contract on their own. Why the hell would they join a conference? They don't need to. Big Ten forever, they'd kind of been the thing, but there was no need for them to do it. It didn't add anything. So that's part of the reason why they canceled the series with MSU and Michigan, because they want to go out west and play USC and Stanford more to get West Coast attention. They want to go east to play Boston College and Navy and Army, get East Coast attention, and they can afford to do that. If your team could afford to be independent, you would want it to be independent. There's a reason everybody thinks Texas is going to try to be independent one day. BYU went independent. Now they're trying to get into a conference because they're not in the same situation Notre Dame is. So this idea that everybody's trying to start this thing about Notre Dame should join a conference, it ain't going to happen. It doesn't need to happen. And it's another stupid off-season talking point. Thankfully, we're only a month before the season, but since apparently we're no longer talking about satellite camps, those are the new topics. And the other one was the playoff. We're talking about expanding it to 8. Why are we talking about this now? Like, we can think of better questions to ask these coaches, right? We've got to be able to. Do you think the playoff should be expanded to 8? First of all, 95% of these coaches aren't even going to sniff the playoff. Their teams just aren't going to sniff the playoff. It doesn't matter. We can talk about the playoff. We get close to the playoff when we get after it. I understood it going into the first year of the playoff. We want to figure out how it went. But this month here where we're talking about it just seems really stupid and lazy, and it just annoys me. Joe, do you have any thoughts on any of that stuff? I just wanted to get that off my chest.
Well, first of all, I think that we
should. People asking questions to coaches, be better with your questions and think of more interesting things.
I think we should start a segment on this podcast that is you ranting about something for a couple minutes, because that was very entertaining. Just have and now Chris rants about something.
You know what really grinds my gears?
Yes, that would be perfect. No, I agree with you wholeheartedly. The other thing about Notre Dame that's interesting is now that every conference wants to start playing conference games earlier in the season, even the Big Ten is starting it in 2016. Is it 2016? Anyways, they're all starting to do that. It makes it much easier for Notre Dame too, because I think Notre Dame probably had to struggle to schedule teams in the middle of conference schedules a little bit. And now that, conference schedules are spreading out a little bit, it'll be easier for Notre Dame to schedule the teams they want to schedule anyways. So that was the only small addition I had for that. But otherwise, I was just mostly entertained by your ranting.
I understand why some of these coaches are going to say certain things. Like Gus Malzahn wants to say the SEC was too tired going into the playoff, or Nick Saban saying the NFL draft was an issue. I understand it, but when we give credence to every little thing they say, we're kind of buying into what they want to do. They're trying to sell a message to just whatever, and I think we jump on it too easily. Oh, do you see this thing that someone said? How outrageous, whatever. And the coaches don't care. They're just giving their thoughts. It's dumb. We ask dumb questions of coaches. There are better things to ask. I was at Mac Media today. Didn't want to ask a coach how excited he was about the season. Like, we can find more interesting things to talk about.
Yeah, and if you get – what are the odds that you get an interesting answer to, are you excited for the season, right? Like,
Right.
0%. So, yeah, asking something more interesting
We're getting to
more technical is –
we're really getting to a saturation point. I mean, part of it's me and my job, so I had to watch a lot of these coaches on various ESPN interviews, but I felt bad for these coaches having to be asked the same question like 6 times in 6 different interviews about like the playoff, and it's like, your team went 3-9 last year. Why are you asking this guy about the playoff? He's not thinking about the playoff. He doesn't care about the playoff. Ask him about his team. Ask him, why things are going to be different. I don't know.
Well, and it seems like if you were trying to generate,
and there's going to be a lot of that at Big Ten Media Days on Thursday and Friday too.
Oh, yeah, that's unfortunate. But like, if you were trying to generate page views or something, right? You probably want to ask a more interesting question than, "Are you excited about the season?" Like, you're not going to get an answer that's interesting enough to like entice readers or anything.
Right, and that's part of why I try to do that. I will say, for TV folks, they don't really need. I mean, they should be trying to get the more interesting soundbite, but a lot of times they just want the generic soundbite, and it's not really a big deal what this coach says in your 3-minute SportsCenter interview. It's more the image of him being there, making you look more prestigious, making their program look more prestigious. What's said in those 3 minutes doesn't really matter. Some guys ask good questions. Like Dan Patrick, whenever he has a coach on, is always just a must listen. Dan Patrick is so good at asking questions. He's one of the best sports interviewers out there, I think. Some guy, Jim Rome's very good at that. Tim Brando was, although he's not doing radio anymore. But some guys are just real good getting a conversation going. Some folks are just there to talk and say they were on their show. And there are good ones, there are bad ones. And since it's my job to kind of go through all of them, I get a little frustrated at times. So basketball. Now, Josh, our intrepid traveler, wrote a very good long roundup of the basketball recruiting situation and the idea of MSU bringing in a super class. He paints that picture not great in terms of getting the super class, but it still is positioned to be a very good class. They've already got Josh Langford, who appears to be a great fit for the program. 6'4" shooting guard who has actually been kind of compared to Draymond Green, which is an interesting thing. But good passer is the word too. Good scorer. There's some information about Miles Bridges, who appears to want to stay close to home. Him and Cassius Winston could be a package deal at Michigan or Michigan State. His mom, Bridges' mom, is high on the MSU coaches. Cassius Winston's another local situation kind of up there, and there's also Josh Jackson, the number 1 player in the class of 2016. Some people don't know if he's going to play college in the United States. There's not a whole ton of information in his recruitment, but between them and Nick Ward, who MSU already has for that class, it's said to be possibly a super class. I mean, Joe, how do you kind of look at things?
Yeah, I think so. There's one specific difference between this super class and sort of previous super classes that might have included, Jaleel Okafor and Tyus Jones or whoever, and that is the fact that they've already got Josh Langford and Nick Ward, right? So Josh Langford's the best recruit that has gotten since Gary Harris. And before that, I mean, you could go back to sort of early 2000s guys. But I mean, he was a major get already, and Nick Ward has been shooting up boards as well. So that's one of the biggest differences, right? Is that Langford and Ward are already in the fold, which is
Right.
great.
They've already got some of those pieces there. It's not like last time where you're looking at 5 guys who MSU's looking to get, but they miss on all of them, and all of a sudden they're left empty-handed. They've already got some good pieces.
Right. Exactly. So the other interesting thing, so I think Josh Jackson is a total long shot.
Right.
He's mentioned MSU as part of sort of like a larger group. I think eight schools or something like that. That typically happens when you've got a team that's been recruiting you for a long time, right? Stuff that'll never happen. So that's, I mean, super long shot, maybe a 0.5% chance or something. When it comes to Bridges and Winston, those are interesting. So Michigan yesterday or today, got a commit from E.B. Watson, who was a guard in the 2016 class. And so they only have theoretically one open scholarship in that 2016 class. So there's been some talk of one of their guys reclassifying to a 2017. But unless that happens, there aren't 2 spots open at Michigan for a Bridges Winston package deal. So I also figure like that's a relatively there's no guarantee that they're going to be a package deal either. So Winston is probably the bigger of the two. I mean, he's the lower rated recruit between Bridges and Winston, but MSU failed to bring in a point guard in the 2015 class. So it's really just Tum Tum Nairn on the team, who's a pure point, although Aaron Harris and potentially Bryn Forbes and definitely Denzel Valentine will be running the point a little bit. So Winston's, the big fish, partially because he's a little bit more of a U of M. It seems to be sort of between MSU and U of M there. With Miles Bridges, it seems like, it was a big deal when Draymond Green FaceTimed him from the locker room after he won the NBA title. It's pretty cool that Draymond's doing that sort of recruiting for the program still. He's from Flint, so you figure that he's got to be, a new Flintstone in some sense. But Kentucky's in the mix, and so Kentucky's the gorilla in the room, and Kentucky has a long list of guys, and he may or may not even, I'm not sure if he has an offer or if he may or may not get an offer, but he's not as much of a focus. So it'll be interesting. Bridges is also sort of a 3-4 tweener a little bit, or so just sort of a forward, which I think is sort of a perfect fit. Those types of tweeners have played a lot under Izzo in the last, 7-8 years, going back to Draymond and Raymar Morgan and guys like that. So yeah, I mean, it's possible. I think, to me, a super class of Langford, Bridges, Winston, and Ward is possible, if not probable still, just because it's hard to get both those guys probably. But that would be really exciting. I mean, that potential for that team in the 2016-2017 season is very high, considering that you'd have a senior Aaron Harris, junior Bess and Marvin Clark and Tum Tum, and then 4 top 50 potentially, depending on how high Nick Ward gets, but definitely top 70 freshmen coming in. So the exciting stuff. It'll be interesting to see when those guys end up committing to. Probably, I think they want to commit before the start of their own basketball season. So high school basketball season. So I think hopefully we'll know by October, November.
So yeah, that's the latest recruiting situation. In some, since we've been off, some former Spartan news. Keith Appling signed a 2-year deal with the Orlando Magic, partially guaranteed. I believe it's a partially guaranteed deal. And Brandon Dawson, who was drafted by the Clippers, ended up signing with them. So that's pretty good news for 2 former players who came in with a lot of hype as recruits, had a lot of ups and downs as players, but to see them at least getting a cup of coffee in the league and getting paid for it's good. Appling, especially, what he went through those last couple of years was just a whole heck of a lot. And I think this kind of goes to show that it was a large part mental on Appling's part coming off of that broken wrist. He has the talent. He had the talent, but he had been hampered by so much stuff. And for him to go out like he did was unfortunate. But I think it's good to see that he's still in the game, and now he's got a chance to play in the league. So good for him, for a kid who's been through a lot.
Yeah, I thought that was awesome for Appling. And yeah, I mean, a lot of injuries, to be one of the only, to be the only between he and Payne, the only 4-year seniors who never made a Final Four under Tom Izzo, is too bad. But yeah, I mean, that kid really battled. You forget too that he played 2 guard on that disastrous 2010-2011 team that lost in the first round to UCLA.
Right, he wasn't even a point guard. He became a point guard for his last 3 years because Corey Lucius got kicked off the team.
And he shot like above 40% from 3 as a freshman. So that UCLA game is sort of an underrated heartbreaker because
that was such a weird. I was at that game. I was covering that game. We had all our stories written up.
Yeah.
I was just like, wait a minute, and you look up and you're like, wait, and then you go back to and you look up again, wait a minute, and then that was another year. That was another year where a senior point guard went out in tears after former TOC contributor Jeremy Warren-Mundy was with me, and he asked Lucas the first question in the press conference, and Lucas started crying with his career being done. So can blame Jeremy for that.
Well, the other thing that was interesting about that game was it was on St. Patrick's Day in 2011. So, I mean, I lived in Cedar Village at the time, and it was a pretty interesting scene in general. But we were watching the game with the sound off because we had a ton of people over at our house. And so the very last call, MSU was down by 2, I'm pretty sure. And so Lucas got the ball. I thought that he had gotten fouled and was going to the line. But
so did I when I saw it, because I was on the other end of the court.
Right, but he got called for the travel. So I remember just going nuts, like, oh my God, Lucas is going to the line, like potentially to tie it up to send this game into overtime. I was like just totally losing it.
It's interesting comparing it. Lucas goes out on the travel call and Appling goes out on the fouling out call on a 3-pointer. That's 2 pretty rough ways to end careers.
Yeah, especially considering that Lucas in the previous year had torn his ACL and couldn't make that Final Four.
Yeah, that year was a mess covering that team. But I think we're good. I think time to get out of here. We've been talking. We stretched this into an hour. I didn't think we had a chance to do that. We're good at this. Well, if you're still with us, thanks for listening in.
Yeah, and I'll make sure to change the batteries in my smoke alarms before the next podcast.
How long has that been going on? Do you just not hear it at this point? It's been going on so long.
Well, I think that's part of it. It's in my roommate's room, so I kind of figured that he would take care of it at some point, but it hasn't happened yet. So.
All right, well, go do that. Don't burn the apartment down. Yeah. Thanks everybody for listening. Subscribe on iTunes. You can follow The Only Colors on Twitter at The Only Colors. I'm at Chris Vanini. He's at Jobin2, number 2 letter E. And can't promise if we'll have one of these next week. It's going to kind of depend, but we'll definitely pick these up again and try to make this a weekly thing again once we get into football, because there'll be plenty to talk about them. So for Joe, this is Chris Vanini. Thanks for listening, and see you, everybody.
See ya.